So far, we've investigated two main features of tastes. First, the degree of substitutability which can be seen in the shapes of indifference curves, and second, the way that indifference curves relate to one another, or the way that the marginal rate of substitution changes across indifference curves. We'll now point out a third feature, the extent to which a good is essential to a consumer's happiness. We begin with two different blue indifference curves drawn from two indifference maps representing two different tastes. In panel A, the indifference curve intersects the horizontal axis. In panel B, on the other hand, the indifference curve converges to the horizontal axis, but never touches it. We then add a second magenta indifference curve to each map, and again, the magenta indifference curve in panel A intersects the horizontal axis, while that in panel B only converges to it. Finally, we add a third indifference curve to each map, and again, the one in panel A intersects the horizontal axis, while the one in B does not. Next, consider two bundles that lie on the same indifference curve in panel A, bundles like A and B, which both lie on the blue indifference curve, or bundles like C and D, which both lie on the green indifference curve. By definition, the consumer is equally happy at A and B, but at bundle A, the consumer is consuming none of the X2 good. Thus, the X2 good is not really essential for the consumer's happiness. The consumer can in fact reach the blue level of happiness by consuming some of X2 and some of X1, as she does at bundle B. But she can also reach the same level of happiness by simply consuming X1, as she does at bundle A. The same relationship holds between bundles C and D. The same cannot be said for the X2 good for the tastes graphed in panel B. Here, no matter which two bundles we pick on the same indifference curve, for example bundles E and F, it's always the case that in order to reach that indifference curve, those bundles will contain some of X2 and some of X1. Since the indifference curve does not cross the horizontal axis, you can never reach the magenta indifference curve by simply consuming the X1 good and none of the X2 good. Thus X2 is essential to the consumer's happiness. There's no way to reach any of the indifference curves without consuming some of the X2 good. Or put differently, without consuming the X2 good, the consumer is no better off than she is at the origin where she consumes none of either good. A good is therefore defined as essential for a consumer if that consumer cannot reach a utility level above that which she would attain by consuming nothing, unless she consumed at least some of the essential good. In terms of the graph, a good is essential if the indifference curves do not cross the axis of the other good. In other words, good X2 was essential if the indifference curves did not cross the horizontal X1 axis. Similarly, X1 will be essential if the indifference curves do not cross the vertical X2 axis. All goods are essential for a consumer if her indifference map looks like that in panel B, where all the indifference curves converge to the axes but never touch them. In Chapter 6, the distinction between essential and non-essential goods will become important in determining whether a consumer will end up at an interior solution, that is to say, at an optimal consumption bundle at which the consumer consumes some of every good, or whether the consumer might end up at what we'll call a corner solution, where the consumer consumes some of one good but none of the other good.